Hi, this is Len Furman, the sports time traveler, with an article titled 1924 Babe Ruth and 1954 Roger Bannister. Subtitle: Two of the giants of 20th century sports were at the height of their powers this week in 1924 and 1954. I start with a note from the sports time traveler. I have an update I just had to share with you from this day precisely 100 years ago and 70 years ago. We'll start with a short story about Babe Ruth in 1924 and then travel ahead 30 years to Roger Bannister in 1954. Detroit, August 7th, 1924. Yesterday afternoon, the Yankees finished up their series here in Detroit against the Tygers, spelled Tygers. That's an intentional spelling of the Detroit club's nickname that some sports writers have been using all season, since the club's player manager is the great Ty Cobb, now in his 20th season. Cobb is not quite the player he used to be, but he is by no means nearing the end of his career, as he is batting .340. But the big man, the Bambino, Babe Ruth, at age 29, is at his peak and is having a fabulous season. In the fourth inning, Ruth hit a home run, his 36th of the season, in the Yankees' 106th game. That puts Ruth on a pace to possibly break his record of 59 in 1921. But what's more astonishing is that while swinging for the fences, he has now pushed his batting average for the season up to .402. This is a statistical season the likes of which have never been seen before. Below, in the Substack written version of the article, you can read how the great New York Daily News sports writer Marshall Hunt described Ruth's gargantuan blast, which was noted to be one of the longest ever made on these grounds. And Ruth did it on a rainy day at Detroit's Navin Field. Here's the excerpts of the article from Marshall Hunt. Herman Ruth enjoyed a certain solace between showers for the adequate reason that in the fourth inning he leaned into a baseball with such vigor and vehemence that it shot toward the low-flying clouds, was caught, tossed, and bobbled by the wind, and plunged precipitously into Trumbull Avenue. The ball cleared the right wall by 100 feet. Tolerant clients, you should have seen that 36th homer of Herman Ruth. It would have tickled the cockles of your heart. Ruth made 3 home runs in the Detroit series. As a result of today's Herculean smack, your correspondent is compelled to disinter the bromidai expression. It was one of the longest home runs ever made on these grounds. Quite true, too. The Yankees hold first place in the American League at 60-46, 1 game ahead of the Tygers and 3 games ahead of the slumping Senators, who have now lost 6 straight games, but have Walter Johnson going to the mound today for the first time in a week to try and turn things around. Babe Ruth is truly the sole reason why the Yankees are still in first place, as demonstrated by a statistical analysis that appears in the Substack article below here of the 4-game series against Detroit. I found this article in the Battle Creek, Michigan Moon Journal. Here's the excerpt. New York batted for an average of .299 in the 4 games, but minus the bat of the mighty Babe, their average would have been a measly .243. The big slugger accounted for 7 runs on his homers alone, and his batting undoubtedly is responsible for the Yankees' 2 victories. The sports time traveler will continue following the 1924 pennant race and is keeping close tabs on Babe Ruth to see if he can hit 60 home runs or bat .400 for this 1924 season. And now we move ahead 30 years in the virtual sports time travel machine to Vancouver, British Columbia. Vancouver, August 7th, 1954. I've made the virtual trip back in time 70 years to Vancouver, where the British Empire and Commonwealth Games are taking place. Note from the Sports Time Traveler. The Commonwealth Games, as they are known now in the 21st century, are one of the largest sporting events in the world outside of the Olympics. They have been held every 4 years since 1930, with the exception of 1942 and 1946. In 2022, there were 5,054 athletes from 62 Commonwealth countries that participated in 20 different sports. Now back to 1954. Athletes from all parts of the British Empire are here in Vancouver for one of the largest sports gatherings in the world outside of the Olympics. The track meet is particularly special in this edition because of the hoopla surrounding the mile run. The two greatest milers in the world were in the finals today. Dr. Roger Bannister of England, he is the celebrated first man to break 4 minutes for the mile, which he did 3 months ago yesterday. By the way, you can read or listen to my story about Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile in a link I have provided in the written version of the Substack article. His main competition today is John Landy of Australia. Landy just barely missed, running a sub-4-minute mile on several attempts in the year prior to Bannister's breaking of the barrier. But just 6 weeks after Bannister did it, Landy topped it and set the world record with a 3:58 in Finland, cutting more than a second off of Bannister's time. The race today between Bannister and Landy has been billed around the world as the Mile of the Century and the Miracle Mile. You can watch the race on YouTube as it appeared on live television today. I have posted the link to that video in the article here in the written version of the Substack article. Here's my recap of the race, and I share with you the timestamps from the video. At 2 minutes on the video, the 8 finalists are on the line waiting for the gun to begin the 4-lap race. Bannister is fourth from the left. He is the tall runner in the white top, number 329. Landy is farthest to the right on the inside of the track. At 2:30 on the tape, after 220 yards, half a lap, Baillie of New Zealand leads. Landy, wearing a white top, number 300, is on the outside in fourth. Bannister, with his characteristic rotating arm motion, is in fifth place. As they enter the turn, Landy makes a big move on the outside and bolts into first place. At 2:50 on the tape, coming into the home stretch for the first time, Bannister makes a big move, and he pulls into second place, about 5 yards behind Landy as they pass the quarter mile. Landy's time for the opening quarter was 58.6. At the 3:30 mark on the tape, Landy, running with smooth strides and a more economical arm motion than Bannister, maintains his 5-yard lead over Bannister through the next 220 yards and reaches 3/8 of a mile in about 1:30. But on the turn, Landy again seems to accelerate and increases his lead noticeably to about 10 yards. At 3:45 on the tape, as they come off the turn, Bannister speeds up a bit, and the gap is back down to 5 yards, again, as they run up the home stretch for the second time. At 4 minutes on the tape, Landy, looking very fresh, reaches the half mile in 1:58. He still has the same 5-yard lead on Bannister. At 4:20 on the tape, on the back stretch of the third lap, Landy peeks over his left shoulder, and this seems to invigorate Bannister, who immediately picks up his pace. Over the next 50 yards, Bannister closes the gap to just 2 yards as they reach 5/8 of a mile in approximately 2 minutes and 30 seconds. At 4:35 on the tape, just as he did on the first 2 laps, Landy accelerates into the turn and pulls away from Bannister, once more opening a 5-yard lead. At 4:50 on the tape, Bannister covers the move as they reach the home stretch for the second to last time. By the middle of the home stretch, Bannister is just a stride off from Landy. At 5 minutes on the tape, Landy is just barely ahead of Bannister as they reach the bell for 1 lap to go. The 3/4 mile time is 2:58.7. At 5:15 on the tape, on the penultimate turn, Landy increases his pace and opens up a 3-yard lead. No one else is anywhere near the 2 great milers. At 5:30 on the tape, they reached 220 to go in about 3 minutes 30 seconds. Landy is still in front by a yard. 5:45 on the tape. Late in the final turn, with perhaps 120 yards to go, Bannister begins his kick. Landy looks over his left shoulder to see where Bannister is, and he's not there. Bannister has blasted past Landy on his right side in just a couple of seconds. Bannister opens up a stunning 5-yard lead, and he maintains it all the way to the tape. At 6 minutes on the video, Bannister crosses the finish line in first place. He immediately collapses into the arms of an official. Bannister's winning time is 3:58.8. Landy is second in 3:59.6. It's the first time that two men have broken 4 minutes for the mile in the same race, and they are still the only two men who have broken the once unthought unbreakable barrier of 4 minutes for a mile. Although he has lost the head-to-head matchup, Landy can take solace that he is still the world record holder, the fastest miler in history. Jack Hewins of the AP interviewed Bannister right after the race. Hewins noted that Bannister, who had been suffering from a cold earlier this week, was coughing heavily and could barely talk. But Bannister managed to tell Hewins, "The race went just about as I expected." Hewins then asked Bannister about his devastating final kick, to which Roger replied, "I began to press him on the turn, which is something I never do, and I knew it had worked when I saw him look over his left shoulder for me just as I passed him on the right." Bannister has reportedly run as fast as 53 seconds for the last 400 of a mile in the past. Confident of his final kick, his strategy of letting Landy lead but never getting too far in front worked out perfect today. Dr. Roger Bannister will now return to his rounds as a physician in London and continue training for the final competition of his running career in 3 weeks at the European Games. He has decided that he cannot continue to stay fit for the 1956 Olympics in 2 more years, which would disrupt his medical career. The European Games is the biggest track meet in the world between Olympic Games. It will be like an Olympics to Bannister. The sports time traveler will be making the virtual trip to the European Games in Bern, Switzerland, to experience Roger Bannister's race in the 1,500 meters, the metric mile, and I will report back to you on it around the end of the month. Thanks for listening, and please share the Sports Time Traveler.